What's going on, everybody? Andy Coppens, managing editor here at the B1GTime.com, and Big Ten Media Days in the can, done and dusted. So it's our chance here to put a wrap on Big Ten Media Days. What were the big headlines? What were the big takeaways? That's what we're here to discuss. 5 things I think that you need to pay attention to going into the 2013 season. And number 1 on this list is nobody really just stood out and made this monstrous splash at Big Ten Media Days. And frankly, I'm not surprised given who was in attendance for players and who was in attendance as coaches. If you take a look at what's been going on and who's been hired over the past 4 or 5 years, it's a lot of coaches that are just no-nonsense individuals, a lot of coaches who, while they can deal with the media, it's not their favorite thing to do in the world, and frankly, they're not about giving quotes, they're not about themselves, they're a lot about the team first mentality, and that really played out over the past 48 hours. Having said that, though, I think the Big Ten kept it classy, and folks, that's what the Big Ten is all about, really. Got a chance to speak with Barry Alvarez, Wisconsin's athletic director, as well as Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney. The other part of this was expansion for me. Jim Delaney is really happy with how things are playing out at this point in time, and is very anxious to see what the new dynamic will be moving forward. He really believes in what's happening, and I think that comes across, and it's not just lip service anymore. Having said that, though, I think the other big headline came from Jim Delaney on Wednesday, and that was he spoke specifically about NCAA reform and some big time changes coming. And on Thursday afternoon, after Big Ten Media Days wrapped up, of course, Mark Emmerick had an exclusive interview in the Indy Star talking about how there is a call for Big Ten, or for all the NCAA presidents to get together at the convention in January in San Diego, and this is going to be about fundamental transformation of the NCAA. I think you're going to see streamlining of committees. You're going to see a lot of changes here. Jim Delaney spoke specifically about some of the things that he would like to see. He would love to see a miscellaneous expenses stipend, if you will, play out to kind of get the real cost of an education, a real cost of being a college student involved in there. And I think that also means that there's going to be a separation between the haves and the have-nots, at least in the football side of things. I think you're going to be able to see individual institutions in conferences especially, make the stand of whether or not they can pay players a certain amount of money and what that amount of money will be. I think the NCAA will also come up with a range and kind of help those programs along. I also think it's going to affect college basketball in terms of the haves and have-nots. The mid-majors are going to have some real struggles, I think, in terms of paying their players. I think that's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out. The other part of this is I think you're going to see the NCAA's committees very streamlined. You're going to see a lot of interesting stuff there. Very interesting comments, I thought, also from Jim Delaney on kind of the lifelong education front. I thought that was very interesting in terms of making sure that the scholarship for these players are all about the individual. So going to be very interesting and see how this moves forward come January. And like I said via Twitter, follow me at Andy Coppens. Shameless plug. No, but seriously, folks, that's exactly what I said. I said this change is going to come within a year. I fully expect by this time next year, they've got the framework in place to make that change by the 2015 year. So I think it's going to be very intriguing to watch over the coming year. The third takeaway for me is there's a very new and palpable energy around the Illini program. Getting a chance to speak to Corey Lewis, getting a chance to speak with Nathan Scheelhaus, and also getting a chance to speak with Tim Beckman, the head coach there. It is very clear that whatever went on last year, something in the offseason clicked either within these players or within that coaching staff, and there's a definite new energy, almost like it's a new era in Illini football. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to watch how that transitions onto the field as camp comes along, Camp Rantui, and also, of course, moving into the season, how that plays out. Do they get 4 or 5 wins out of this season? Do they become a bowl-eligible surprise team? I think a lot of people are doubting this team. A lot of people have picked this team to finished dead last inside its division, and rightfully so considering last year. But I think that's going to be very interesting to watch going forward, so make sure you check that out. The fourth thing for me, Braxton Miller is not running at all from the Heisman talk. In fact, it's clearly a goal of his. And secondly, he embraces it, and his team embraces that whole mantra. Jack Muirhort, the offensive tackle, I got a chance to speak with him, and he said it's a personal goal of the offensive line to make sure that Braxton Miller wins the Heisman Trophy. And they also say, along with winning that Heisman Trophy, probably most likely means that this team is going to be successful in terms of making a major splash come the postseason. I tend to agree with that. If Braxton Miller is going to win the Heisman Trophy, that likely means a one-loss or an undefeated season for the Buckeyes. The fifth one, and I think the most important one here, is that nobody, and I mean nobody, is a fan of how this targeting rule in the NCAA is going to be implemented. There are some people that are a little afraid of how this rule is going to be interpreted and how it's going to impact the ability of players to make plays. Because let's face it, coaches, and this is something Tim Beckman, the Illini head coach, really hit on, is that coaches are teaching players, and have been for the past 15 years, that make the hit, try to wrap up, but as you're doing that, you also need to go for the ball. And that creates some issues because as you're going for the ball, hands aren't necessarily always in the body. They're not necessarily always down in position to be able to make a play that's not above the shoulders. So I think, there are some question marks as to what's going on there. I think it's also the fact that it is open to interpretation. It's not a black and white rule. It's a gray rule that really has a lot of people freaked out. Barry Alvarez specifically asking the question of where you draw the line and when is football no longer football. I think those are all valid points going forward here. The other part of this is, clearly everybody wants safety to be a big thing. Concussions are obviously a big thing. But on the whole, I think the players and coaches are really worried about how this rule is implemented and how it's going to affect the game of college football. Does it make it better? Because I think anything that's going to make it safer and better is great. But anything that's going to make it safer and less attractive doesn't help the sport at all. A lot of headlines coming over the next few days, and we'll be breaking down some stuff. We'll be providing you with some of the audio that we got through Big Ten Media Days, some of the big interviews that we had, and a lot of things coming this weekend. So make sure you check us out, theb1gtime.com. I'm Andy Coppens, managing editor, saying have yourselves a great one, and don't forget, this is where the big boys play.